I did not know my aunt was living off my sister until the night she sat across from us at dinner, insulted my dead mother, and basically begged to have her own money cut off. And the wildest part was, she had no idea she was doing it. She thought she was putting my sister in her place, but really she was standing in the middle of a house she did not pay for, eating food bought with money she did not earn, telling the one person still keeping her life together that she did not need a damn thing from her. My sister, who I will call Claire, did not yell, did not slam the table, did not throw wine in anybody's face, which honestly would have been less terrifying. She just smiled, tilted her head a little and asked, "Are you sure about that?" To understand why that one question felt like thunder in a quiet room, you have to understand why family, especially my mum. My mum, Elena, came to the United States from a small village outside Da Nang when she was in her early 20s, and she carried that village with her everywhere, in her cooking, in her prayers, in the way she saved every rubber band from the mail, in the way she could turn one chicken into 4 dinners and act like that was totally normal. She was the second oldest of 7 kids, which meant she was basically born already responsible for somebody. She grew up poor, not movie poor, not aesthetic poor, but the kind of poor where children learn not to ask for fruit because fruit costs money, where school supplies are treated like treasure, where a new pair of shoes means someone else is going without something. My mom was brilliant, stubborn, and deeply religious in that old-school immigrant way, where God, family, and education were all tied together so tightly you could not separate one from the other. She worked her way through college after coming to America, became the first person in her family to graduate, and once she made it even a little bit, she turned around and started pulling everyone else behind her. She paid tuition for siblings, cousins, nieces, nephews, people I had met once when I was 6, and people I could not pick out of a lineup if my life depended on it. Every month, money went back to Vietnam, and every month my mum found a way to make our household stretch. We did not go hungry, let me be clear, but we also did not live like the family of a woman who was funding half a village's dream of upward mobility. I grew up in California wearing clearance rack sneakers while some cousin overseas went to a private school with my mom's help, and I did not question it much because I was younger, American-born, and honestly kind of sheltered from the whole family politics circus. Claire was not sheltered. Claire was born in Vietnam, came here when she was little, and she remembered things I did not. She remembered which aunt cried on the phone when she needed money, then posted vacation photos 2 weeks later. She remembered which uncle promised he would finish school if my mum paid for it, then dropped out and somehow still expected another chance. She remembered my mum sitting at the kitchen table at midnight with bills spread out like tarot cards, whispering numbers under her breath, deciding what could wait, what could be delayed, what could be sacrificed. So while I saw generosity, Claire saw a slow robbery dressed up as family duty. That was the crack that kept splitting them apart. My mom believed family was sacred even when family was selfish. Claire believed love without boundaries was just a prettier word for being used. And because they were both stubborn enough to argue with a brick wall and expect the wall to apologize, our house could go from peaceful to courtroom drama in under 30 seconds. Claire was sharp, direct, way too honest for the comfort of any adult who thought age automatically meant authority. My mum would say, "Family comes first," and Claire would say, "Then why does our family here always come last?" My mum would tell her not to be disrespectful, and Claire would say asking where the money goes is not disrespect, it is math. You can imagine how well that landed. By the time Claire was a senior in high school, things finally exploded. I was 12, maybe 13, old enough to understand the shouting, but not old enough to understand the grief underneath it. I remember standing in the hallway in my pajamas, holding a glass of water I had no intention of drinking, listening to my mother say that Claire had become cold, selfish, American in the worst way. Claire shot back that if being American meant not letting grown adults drain you dry, then maybe Mom should try it sometime. That one hurt. I saw it hit my mother like a slap. Then came more shouting. My dad trying to step in, Claire crying but refusing to sound like she was crying, and finally the sound of drawers opening, clothes being shoved into a duffel bag, the front door closing so hard the little ceramic cross by the entryway rattled against the wall. Claire moved out that night. She was 17. For 4 years, she and my mum barely spoke. My dad and I stayed in touch with her, secretly at first, then not so secretly, because my dad was terrible at lying, and my mum was too smart not to know. Claire worked full-time, went to community college, transferred later, paid for everything herself: rent, books, food, gas, the whole miserable adult starter pack. She never asked my parents for money. Not once. And I think that made my mum proud and furious at the same time, because my mum respected survival more than anything, but she also could not forgive the fact that Claire had survived without coming back and saying, "You were right." Then in 2019, when I graduated high school, I invited Claire. I did not make a big speech about healing or forgiveness. I just texted her, "Hey, I know it might be weird, but I want you there." She showed up in a navy dress, holding flowers and looking like she had practiced being calm in the parking lot. My mum saw her from across the gym lobby and froze. For a second, nobody moved, and then my mom did what immigrant moms do when emotions are too large to discuss directly. She looked Claire up and down and said, "You aren't too skinny, did you eat?" Claire laughed. Not a big laugh, not a movie moment, just this tiny, cracked laugh that made my dad turn away and wipe his glasses, even though they were not dirty. That was how they started talking again. Not perfectly, not magically. They did not become best friends who had brunch and processed trauma over mimosas. They still argued, still jabbed at each other, still carried years of bruises under every conversation. But there was warmth again, cautious and awkward, like someone had opened a window in a room that had been closed too long. Then, in early 2022, my mum died. It was sudden enough to feel unreal, slow enough in the hospital to be cruel, and final in a way I still do not know how to talk about without feeling like the floor drops a little. My dad collapsed into himself. I became useful in small ways, calling relatives, making coffee nobody drank, folding blankets in the waiting room, but Claire became the person who handled everything. Funeral arrangements, paperwork, bank accounts, insurance, the estate, the relatives calling from Vietnam with voices full of grief and questions and sometimes very practical concerns about what would happen now. I thought Claire was doing it because someone had to. I did not know she was also quietly stepping into one of my mother's biggest obligations. My mum had been supporting her youngest sister, whom I will call Aunt Rosa, for years. Rosa lived in a modest but comfortable house in Vietnam, a house my mother had mostly paid for, though nobody said that part too loudly because family pride is apparently more delicate than actual glass. Rosa had a daughter, Lynn, sweet kid, smart, shy, the kind of girl who looked down when adults argued. My mom had been paying Rosa's living expenses and putting money aside for Lynn's college fund. After my mom died, Claire took over. She did not announce it. She did not ask for praise. She did not even tell me. Every month, money went out, just like before, except now it came from the daughter who had once been called selfish for asking why the money had to go out at all. And that is what made the dinner in Vietnam so insane. Because last December, Claire and I decided to spend the holidays there. Partly to reconnect with family, partly because grief makes you do strange sentimental things, like visit places your mother used to describe while pretending you were not looking for her in every market stall and bowl of soup. For the first few days, it was actually nice. We visited cousins, ate too much, sweated through our clothes, laughed at how badly my Vietnamese had survived suburban California. Then came the dinner at Aunt Rosa's house. The house was painted pale yellow, with potted plants lined along the front like little soldiers. Inside, the ceiling fan clicked in a lazy rhythm, and the table was packed with food, fish, soup, herbs, rice, all of it arranged like a peace offering. Rosa hugged us at the door, pressed her cheek to mine, told Claire she looks tired, which in our family can mean concern or insult depending on tone. At first, everything was fine. We talked about cousins, weather, traffic, food prices. Then my mother's name came up, and the air changed. Rosa sighed dramatically, touched her chest, and said, "Your mother was a saint. We will never have another like her." Claire nodded softly and said, "Yes, she gave a lot." Rosa looked at her then, really looked at her, and something sour passed over her face. "Too bad you did not understand that when she was alive," she said. "The chopsticks in my hand stopped halfway to my bowl." Claire blinked once. Rosa kept going, "You broke her heart, you know. Leaving home, refusing to speak to her, acting like you knew better than everyone. A daughter should not be so hard. A woman should not be so hard. How will any man stay with you if your mouth is always sharper than a knife?" And just like that, the room got very, very quiet. And when I say the room got quiet, I mean the kind of quiet where you suddenly hear everything you did not notice before, the ceiling fan clicking, A spoon touching the edge of a bowl, someone shifting in a plastic chair in the next room, even the little wet sound of my own nervous swallow. I looked at Claire because I expected the old Claire, the 17-year-old version who would have thrown the whole table into a war zone with one sentence. But she just sat there, her shoulders relaxed, her face still, her eyes fixed on Aunt Rosa like she was studying a document she had already decided was fraudulent. Rosa seemed encouraged by the silence, which was her first mistake. She leaned back, lifted her chin, and kept going, saying that my mother had cried for years because of Claire, that a good daughter does not abandon her family, that in Vietnam people understood respect, not like in America where girls get too loud and too proud and forget their place. I felt heat crawl up my neck because this was not grief anymore, this was performance. This was Rosa using my dead mother as a stick to beat my sister with while sitting under a roof my mother had helped pay for. I opened my mouth, but Claire moved one hand slightly, not even looking at me, just a tiny gesture that said, "Do not," and for some reason I listened. Rosa turned toward me next, maybe because she thought I was the softer target. She smiled with this sweet, poisonous look and said, "You should learn from your sister's mistakes, honey. Be gentle, be grateful. Do not wait too long to marry. A woman alone gets bitter, and bitter women bring shame into a family." Then she glanced back at Claire and added, "Some people think being educated means they are better than everyone, but a woman still needs a husband, a home, children, God's plan. I swear if hypocrisy had a smell, that room would have needed every window open." Claire slowly set her chopsticks down, and that sound, wood touching porcelain, felt louder than any shout. She folded her hands in front of her and said, "Aunt Rosa, can I ask you something?" Rosa smiled like she had won. "Of course," she said, "ask." Claire nodded, calm as Sunday morning, and said, "When my mother paid your university tuition, why did you drop out after the first year?" Rosa's smile disappeared so fast, it was almost funny. My cousin Lynn, who had been sitting near the kitchen doorway with her phone in her lap, looked up. Rosa said, "That was a long time ago." Claire said, "Sure, but you brought up old family history, so I thought we were opening the museum." I almost choked on air. Claire continued, "Mum worked double shifts back then. She was sending money every month so you could study business administration because you told her you wanted independence. You told her you wanted to make something of yourself, and then you quit school because some married contractor with a gold watch told you he was going to leave his wife." Rosa's face went red in patches. "Do not speak to me that way," she snapped. Claire tilted her head. Which part was disrespectful? The part where he was married, or the part where he did not leave his wife? Nobody moved. I could feel my heartbeat in my fingertips. Rosa slammed her palm on the table and said, "You know nothing about my life." Claire's voice stayed soft, and somehow that made it worse. "I know enough. I know my mother paid for your tuition, then paid your rent when that man disappeared, then paid your medical bills, then helped buy this house so you and Lynn would not be stranded. I know she skipped vacations, wore the same winter coat for 12 years and told us we did not need cable because money was tight, while money was somehow never too tight to save you." Rosa stood up so quickly her chair scraped backward. "You come into my house and insult me." "My house?" Claire looked around slowly at the tiled floor, the framed picture of the Virgin Mary, the curtains with little embroidered flowers, then back at Rosa. "Technically," she said, "it is the house my mother paid for. The soup in front of me could have turned into lava, and I would not have noticed." Rosa pointed a shaking finger at Claire and said, "Your mother helped because she loved me. She understood family. You never did." Claire's expression changed then, not much, just enough that I saw something underneath the calm, something wounded and tired and older than either of us. "See?" she said. "I understood too well. That was the problem. I understood every time she said no to herself so she could say yes to you. I understood when she cried over bank statements and then defended you the next morning like you were some helpless child instead of a grown woman. I understood when she called me selfish because I asked why everyone else's future mattered more than ours." For the first time all night, Rosa had no quick answer. She just breathed hard, eyes darting around like she was searching for support in the walls. I glanced at Lynn, and her face broke my heart a little. She looked embarrassed, but not surprised, and that told me this was not the first time money and pride had poisoned the air in that house. Then Rosa did what people do when the truth gets too close. She got louder. She said Claire was cruel, Americanized, arrogant, unmarried, unnatural, a shame to her mother's memory, and with every word her voice climbed higher until it stopped sounding like anger and started sounding like anger and started sounding like panic wearing lipstick. Claire waited. She let Rosa spend herself. Then she said, "You are right about one thing. My mother loved you. She loved you more generously than you deserved, and after she died, I tried to honor that." Rosa blinked. That was the first moment, I think, when something in the room shifted for her, not understanding yet, not fully, but a little shadow of doubt crossed her face. Claire did not explain. "Not yet," Rosa snapped. "I do not need your attitude, and I do not need anything from you." That sentence landed in the room like a loaded gun dropped on the table. I looked at Claire, and this time she looked back at me. Her eyes were calm, but there was a spark there, a terrible little spark. Claire turned back to Rosa and said, "I want to make sure I heard you correctly. You do not need anything from me?" Rosa laughed, sharp and ugly. "From you? What could I possibly need from you?" Claire said. "So you are saying you want nothing from me? No help, no support, no involvement?" Rosa crossed her arms. "I can take care of myself and my daughter. I have always taken care of myself." That was such an outrageous sentence I almost made a noise, but Claire just smiled. Not a happy smile, not even a cruel smile. It was the kind of smile a lawyer gives when the witness has just destroyed their own case. She said, "Okay." Rosa threw her napkin down and said, "Get out, both of you. I will tell your father how you behaved. I will tell everyone." Claire stood up slowly and adjusted the strap of her bag on her shoulder. She looked at me and said, "You heard her, right?" I said, "Yeah, because what else was there to say?" My voice sounded small. Claire nodded. "Good." Then she looked at Lynn, and her face softened for half a second. "Take care of yourself, kiddo," she said. Lynn looked like she wanted to ask something, maybe wanted to stop us, maybe wanted to disappear. But Rosa was still standing there, breathing fire, and the moment passed. We walked out without another word. Outside, the night air was warm and damp, and the streets smelled like motorbike exhaust, rainwater, and somebody frying garlic nearby. It was so normal it felt rude. Behind us, Rosa's voice was still rising inside the house, muffled now by the closed door, probably rehearsing the version where she was the victim and Claire was the monster. We got into the car, and I waited until we were halfway down the street before I said, "Claire, what did you mean when you asked if I heard her?" Claire looked out the window for a while. Neon signs moved across her face in red and blue streaks. Then she said, "She has no idea, does she?" I said, "No idea about what?" Claire turned to me, and her expression was not smug, not triumphant, just exhausted. "I have been paying her monthly expenses since Mum died," she said. "Rent money, food, utilities, medical stuff, and Lynn's college fund, though that one is separate." For a second I honestly thought I had misheard her. "You," I said, "you have been paying for Aunt Rosa." Claire gave this tiny laugh with no humor in it. "Yeah, funny, right? The selfish daughter, the one who did not understand family." I stared out the windshield because suddenly I could not look at her without feeling too much. All those years she had fought Mom about being used, and then after Mom died she had become the person holding the rope, not because Rosa deserved it, but because Mum would have wanted Lynn safe, and because love is complicated and grief makes hypocrites of everyone. I said, "Why did you not tell me?" Claire shrugged. "Because I was not doing it for applause." Then, after a beat, she added, "And because I did not want you trying to talk me out of it before I was ready to stop." We got back to the hotel a little before 10. The lobby was bright and cool, full of tourists in linen shirts who had no idea that two women had just walked out of a family dinner, carrying 3 generations of emotional debt. Claire went straight to the little desk in our room, opened her laptop and logged into her bank account. I stood by the bed like an idiot, still holding my purse, watching her move with that quiet efficiency she had when she had already made a decision. Click. Password. Verification code. Transfers. Recurring payments. Rosa Wen living support. Cancel. The screen asked if she was sure. Claire paused, just for one breath, and I saw her jaw tighten. For a moment I thought maybe she would change her mind. Then she clicked confirm. That was it. No music swelled. No thunder cracked. No dramatic revenge speech echoed through the room. Just one little confirmation box on a laptop screen. And an entire grown woman's free ride ended before the hotel air conditioner even kicked back on. Claire closed the laptop and said, "I am going to shower." I sat on the edge of the bed for a long time after the bathroom door closed, listening to the water run, thinking about my mother, about generosity, about how sometimes kindness becomes a cage when nobody is allowed to say enough. And the strangest part was, I did not feel sorry for Rosa. Not then. All I could think was, she asked for this. She demanded it. She had looked the person feeding her in the eye and said she did not need a damn thing. The next morning, Claire ordered room service pancakes like nothing had happened, and when I asked if she was okay, she poured syrup over everything and said, "I am fantastic," which in Claire language meant, "Please never ask me that again." We spent the rest of the week at the beach, visiting cousins who were actually happy to see us, eating grilled seafood with our feet in the sand, pretending grief was something you could sweat out under the sun. But under all that calm, I kept wondering when Rosa would notice, because people like Rosa do not notice the hand holding them up until it lets go. And when it finally did, she did not fall right away. That was the scary part. She kept smiling for a while, kept talking, kept acting like nothing had changed, completely unaware that the floor beneath her had already disappeared. For the first few days after we left Aunt Rosa's house, nothing happened, and somehow that made it feel even stranger. Claire and I were still in Vietnam, still waking up to scooter horns and sunlight pushing through thin hotel curtains, still eating breakfast downstairs like normal people, but there was this invisible clock ticking in the corner of every room. I kept expecting Rosa to call, to scream, to accuse Claire of ruining her life, to send one of the cousins as a messenger with some dramatic speech about forgiveness and family honor, but the phone stayed quiet. Claire seemed almost annoyingly peaceful about it. She bought sunglasses from a street vendor, got sunburned at the beach, argued with a waiter about whether iced coffee should count as dessert, and acted like she had not just unplugged her aunt from the financial life support machine my mother had built years ago. I, on the other hand, could not stop thinking about it. At night, while Claire slept, I would lie awake wondering if my mum would have been angry at us, or angry at Rosa, or angry at herself for creating a situation where gratitude had been replaced by entitlement. Grief has a nasty way of turning every decision into a trial, and the person you most want on the witness stand is the one person who cannot answer anymore. When we flew back to California, life went back to its usual rhythm, at least on the surface. Dad asked how the trip went, and Claire said it was hot, beautiful, and educational, which made me nearly choke on my tea. I did not tell him the whole dinner story right away because, honestly, I was not ready to unpack it, and because Dad still carried my mother's family like a fragile box in his chest. Claire went back to work. I went back to my job. The holidays ended, the decorations came down, and Rosa apparently continued living like nothing had changed, which might have been the most Rosa thing of all. Then, about 6 weeks later, I got a message from one of our cousins, a guy I will call Daniel, who's always had the unfortunate family role of knowing everyone's business because everyone trusts him and no one realizes he is terrible at keeping a straight face. He asked if I'd talked to Rosa recently. I said no, why? He sent back 3 dots, then nothing for almost 5 minutes, which is how you know a family scandal has entered the typing stage. Finally, he wrote, "She is saying the bank made a mistake and your mum's account stopped sending money." I stared at my phone and I swear I could hear Claire's little lawyer smile in my head. I asked what she meant by mum's account. Daniel said Rosa was convinced my mother had set up some kind of permanent support arrangement before she died, and now the bank or the estate or maybe Dad had somehow messed it up. She had been calling relatives, complaining that nobody respected my mother's wishes, that she had bills to pay, that people in America were getting greedy with money that was meant for family. There it was, the performance. Not once did she mention Claire. Not once did she say, maybe I should not have screamed at the person who was helping me. In Rosa's version, she was not a grown woman who had insulted her niece and rejected support. She was a victim of paperwork. I called Claire that night. She answered on the second ring, sounding like she was eating something crunchy. I said, "Rosa noticed." Claire said, "Already?" I said, "Already? It has been over a month." Claire said, "There should have been enough in her account to last most of the year if she budgeted like a person with basic survival instincts." I said, "Apparently basic survival instincts were not included in Mum's monthly transfers." Claire laughed once, sharp and short, then went quiet. I asked if Rosa would lose the house. Claire said no, the house was paid off, and unless Rosa did something spectacularly stupid, she would still have a roof over her head. That gave me some relief, more than I expected, because even though I was angry, I did not want to imagine my mother's sister homeless. Then I asked the question that had been sitting in the back of my throat since the hotel room. What about Lynn? Did you close her college fund too? Claire got very quiet. Not cold quiet, heavy quiet. Then she said, "No. I'm not punishing that kid for her mother's mouth. The fund stays, but it goes directly to the school when the time comes, not through Rosa, not through any cousin, not through anyone who suddenly discovers a medical emergency or a broken roof or a business opportunity. Lynn gets a chance. Rosa gets consequences." That sentence stayed with me. Lynn gets a chance. Rosa gets consequences. It was the first time I understood that Claire's revenge was not revenge in the cartoon way people talk about online. It was not destruction. It was not cruelty for sport. It was boundaries finally arriving after years of being delayed, postponed, softened, excused, and spiritually gift-wrapped as family duty. Rosa still had her house. She still had her health. She still had her health. She still had options. What she lost was the right to be comfortably ungrateful on someone else's dime. Over the next few months, the family grapevine became basically a full-time news station. Rosa tried calling my dad, but Claire had already sat him down and told him everything, including the part where she had been paying the expenses herself. Dad cried. That is the part I do not say lightly. My father is not a dramatic man. He is the kind of guy who says, "Traffic was bad," with the same tone most people use to describe a hurricane. But when he realized Claire had quietly carried my mother's burden, after all those years of being called selfish, he put his hand over his face and cried at the kitchen table. He told Claire that Mum would have been proud. Claire looked away and said, "Mum would have told me to keep paying." Dad said, "Maybe, but she would still have been proud." Rosa did not get the rescue she expected. A few relatives tried to pressure Claire, of course. There were messages about forgiveness, about elders, about how Americans forget respect. Claire responded to exactly one of them with a screenshot of Rosa's own words, translated cleanly and politely, the part where Rosa said she did not need anything and could take care of herself. Under it, Claire wrote, "I am respecting her stated wishes." After that, the messages slowed down. Funny how people get quieter when the receipts are organized. The most surprising thing came from Lynn. She emailed Claire privately, not to ask for money, not to defend her mother, but to apologize. She said she had not known Claire was the one helping them. She said she was embarrassed by what happened at dinner and that she wanted to finish school and become the kind of person who did not need to survive on someone else's sacrifice. Claire read that email 3 times and pretended her eyes were watering because of allergies. A year later, Lynn got accepted into a university program, and Claire paid the first tuition bill directly. Rosa found out only after the school confirmed enrollment, and from what Daniel told me, she was furious that the money had not passed through her hands. That, more than anything, told me Claire had made the right call. The last image I have of this whole mess is not the dinner table, though that scene is burned into my memory pretty well. It is Claire standing at my mother's grave one spring afternoon, wearing jeans and a black sweater, holding a small bouquet of yellow flowers because Mum hated white funeral flowers and said they looked like hospital walls. Claire stood there for a long time, then said, "I tried, Mum, I really did." Then she placed the flowers down, wiped her face once, and walked back to the car without another word. And that was Claire, really. Not heartless, not soft either. Just someone who had finally learned that honoring your mother does not mean repeating every painful thing your mother allowed. Some people will say Claire should have warned Rosa. Some will say family means you keep helping even when people hurt you. Some will say Rosa was grieving and spoke out of pain. Maybe, but I was there. I saw her face when she told Claire she did not need anything. I heard the pride in her voice. I watched her mistake kindness for weakness, then call it disrespect when kindness finally packed its bags and left. So now I want to know what you think. Was Claire wrong to cut her off without warning, or did Rosa get exactly the consequence she asked for? Should family support come with unlimited patience, or does there come a point where love has to close the account and walk away? Drop your opinion in the comments, because I already know this one is going to split the room. And if you have ever watched someone bite the hand that fed them, like the video, subscribe and share this story with someone who needs a reminder that generosity is a gift, not a life sentence.